Baggage and past wounds. So here we are in episode 4 of our Higher Harmony series. Talking about relationships, and one of our goals is to help give couples thinking points and talking points. Not that we have all the answers, but maybe things to think about and talk about that people need to work through on their own. So I may call you out with a little anecdote
Absolutely.
right off the bat.
I like it. That'll fire me up.
So early in our relationship, I lived in New Orleans. We weren't married yet.
Mm-hmm.
We had separate houses.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would drive all the way between Baton Rouge and New Orleans to see each other whenever we could. And this one particular morning, I was scheduled to play guitar at the church that was close to my house. Remember
Yes, I remember it.
that? So I didn't think anything of it. And the way this would work is we would go practice about 8 in the morning. We'd go through all the songs, and then there would be a break for maybe up to an hour. And I lived pretty close, so I would drive home and like refresh my coffee, use the restroom, stuff like that, and then go back. So in that moment where I had driven home, you are coming all the way from Baton Rouge to come to church with me to, see me play guitar for the worship band and all this. What did you find, and what did you think?
Yeah, by that point, I feel like I was already invested.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just like a first, second, third date kind of thing.
Right.
I had already caught some feelings, if you will, and I wanted to see you, at church and in that environment. So I drove up to the church, and I was a little anxious because I didn't know anyone other than you. And so when I looked around and I didn't see your vehicle, 'cause I was thinking, well, maybe I could, spot your vehicle parked next to it, walk in, that kind of thing. And when I did, when I drove up, I didn't see your vehicle there. And I was like, well, that's strange. And I think I may have even tried to text. I didn't want to call in case y'all were still practicing.
Mm-hmm.
It's strange. I don't remember all the details of it, but I remember thinking, why would I come all the way to New Orleans and you not be at church? So,
Because we had talked about it previously.
right.
Like, I'll be there, you'll be there.
Yes, I did not know about this habit that you had of leaving after practice to go home and refresh. And so,
Yeah, I didn't do it all the time, but yeah.
right.
From time to time.
But because you live so close, it made sense. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that because I had some relationship issues in the past where people said they were where they were in one place and they were found out to be in another.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I guess because I realized at that point I was invested in you and I had feelings for you, that past issue cropped up and caused a great deal of fear and actually caused me to almost lose my rationality, like overlay what that experience had been in that other relationship into
So
this
like all
one.
those emotions from having discovered that somebody else wasn't where they were supposed to be,
Right.
and they were up to no good.
Right. And I was very, very anxious. And I very rarely, thank God, ever suffer with anxiety. But when I do, I am about trying to fix it. I'm about to uncover whatever is the culprit of the cause. I mean,
Right,
I
right.
am an inaction. Let's get to the bottom of this and let's call it out and wrap it up. And if you hurt me, I am going to either lash back out or I'm going to run. And so that had
But you're
been,
going to address it.
but oh, yeah, absolutely. I had
Right.
driven all the way from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. Of course I was going to address it. Avoidance is something some folks do, and I know that, but I did
Right,
not.
right.
I was not an avoidance kind of
Avoidance is
person.
not your MO.
No. And so you help me remember the rest of the story. I just remember finding you where you were supposed to be.
So yeah, I can't remember if we texted first or whatever, but I think you came to the house and you saw my vehicle was there
Yes.
and you were walking up. I already had my coffee in my hand and you were flustered. You were emotional. There were tears on your face.
Yeah.
And I was walking back out.
And I think it took you by surprise.
Yes.
Because I had not
It
expressed that fear or
it
anxiety
definitely
before.
caught me by surprise. I had no idea that there would be a reaction like that because I've known you for 3 years. I think you've seen you cry like 5 times total. So it wasn't normal. It wasn't normal for me, and I was not sure what was happening.
Yeah. And it was a direct, it was an uncovering for you in terms of discovering
Right.
a little bit about who I was. Because when you first meet someone, you don't just open it all up and say, here's who I am and how I've been hurt, because it makes you vulnerable.
Right.
And,
And you might not even be aware.
oh, absolutely.
Like you might not know what you're carrying around with you that you're going to put on other people. Anyway, I didn't mean to disrupt you.
No, just the whole idea of reactionarily overlaying what I had experienced and hurt and wound with a previous relationship onto a new relationship. I find not just with us, but with some of my, friends and colleagues, people who've shared with me that
'Cause I think that morning it wasn't clear whether or not you were coming, and you were coming kind of as a surprise, I think.
maybe that was it. I just
And
know.
then it kind of seemed like if I wasn't at the church right when you showed up, that maybe out, when the cat's away, the mice will play. I was gonna be doing something else.
Right.
Like just not being honest about where I am.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was going to say about when we are wounded. Now, bear in mind, I had been in a relationship, a previous marriage, and various other, dating relationships over my lifespan, and have learned quite a bit. But I guess wounds had also, that particular wound, that specific wound had caused me some struggles with just creating relationships and sticking by and learning relationships, contending with relationships, because I feel like, looking back on it, I would self-sabotage a lot of times without giving the person the opportunity to show themselves trustworthy. And it made for having a relationship difficult, because I would in fact I was anxious because I didn't want to be hurt like that again.
So it'd be easier to find a reason to break things off rather than let yourself get emotionally attached.
And or exposing myself to being hurt again. And that was what what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be hurt again. And what I also realized with my personality, also when someone would hurt me, especially as I've become older, I would become, if someone hurt me, I would react in a way to call them out on it, and in many cases hurt them back. And that is, it was detrimental to most relationships, and I recognized that, and I had to deal with that. Learn some skills to do that, to handle that.
So I don't know if this carries over for people watching, but like you have a formidable presence about you, to the degree where when I met you and started dating you, I knew right away that I didn't ever want to get on your bad side, because you carry yourself well, you articulate yourself well, and you have I was talking to my brother-in-law earlier, and I was thinking of you. You have this aura about you that draws out honesty, and I would hate to have a moment of lacking integrity and have to deal with you in that moment.
Well, and that being said, I understand that there is we talked about communication in some of our previous episodes, and I think that being able to once we got to know each other and we knew that we were equally invested in each other, you were as interested in me as I was you, I think, and there was a united or a joined investment to see where this relationship would go. Then I could begin to peel back the layers of who I was emotionally, spiritually, and to show those things to you, to kind of test the waters to see, well, I have these wounds. And you know what's interesting? Something that occurred to me when I was thinking about the topic that we were going to discuss is that wounds aren't always left open. I know I tried to put a lot of work into delving into some of the pains, the hurts, the wounds that I had experienced, and to try to heal from those. And what I found that some of those would create, we have scars, and those scars remind us of where we've been and the things that we've contended with. And I feel like when you get to know someone in a relationship like we did, it was a slow, but it was a test of trust to expose those scars. And some were still wounds that I didn't even realize were still open. And so the situation where I became anxious because you weren't where you said you were going to be, it showed it was telling to myself that, oh wow, I thought I was healed and over that and could move forward, but I still had a very sensitive area in that. And then I was able to share it with you and show you.
We talked about that. We talked about that at lunch, and then we've talked about it several times since then. Like, I think we talked about it probably once a week for the following weeks that came. And one thing I've always liked about us is that we seem to drift toward a conversation of our origins and our relationship. Of other relations, like how we started, how our relationship started. It seems like very frequently we go back to how we started. Not only are we celebrating it, but we're kind of reanalyzing it as we go in like a fun way. And that was something that came up several times. And I remember thinking, like, from the period of time that you saw my vehicle not at the church to the period of time that you saw me about to walk out of the house with a fresh cup of coffee, all dressed for church, that I was like, what's going through your head? That poor thing. Who knows? Who knows what you were thinking with all this? So.
And once in that instance, when you were where you said you were going to be, it was a demonstration of it bolstered or built a little bit more of the trust in each other, or for me towards you, for sure. Right. And I feel like when there are opportunities to grow that, especially early on in a relationship, you have to talk about them. I feel like I don't think that's something that I could internalize, even if I wanted to, but some folks do. Some folks can. My best friend's like this. She will internalize it and she won't say anything about it. She'll sit and watch, and it's different. We respond in different ways. But I think once you build a little bit of trust, then you can share with each other, okay, here are some areas of vulnerability. And then you see how the other person contends with that, how you treat that. I've had relationships where it was weaponized, where they would take the wound or the scar, and when they realized that was something that I had dealt with, it was a point of
like to delegitimize you from there forward.
Yes.
So I guess, like, if we're talking about wounds, whether or not they're healed or whether they become scars, I guess they could all be baggage.
Yeah.
Quote unquote baggage, that we bring with us, and we don't always know what we're bringing. Now, you know that I've been reading some Ian Gilchrist, Left Brain, Right Brain, and what Ian says about the left, like the right brain is learning the new thing, discovering the new thing afresh. The left brain likes to make a map, and then instead of seeing a presentation of reality, we see a representation, a representation of reality created in our left mind. And so the baggage that we have is like an overlay, kind of like people do with systematic theology when they read the Bible. They have, and I was just talking about this in the last video that I did. It's like an overlay that they put on top of encountering the Bible, so they can't see it afresh. They see the overlay. So maybe when you drove up and saw my truck not there, you're seeing this overlay of a past experience without realizing that's what you're doing. And then when you see me coming out with the cup of coffee and I'm about to go to church, and you're like, oh, I see what's going on here. He just came back home. It doesn't live too far. Welcome back to the right hemisphere.
Yeah.
Welcome back to seeing things afresh and anew without that overlay. And it makes me wonder, like, I can think of relationships of my own and of other people where people completely exist within an overlay. And it's like, because you can have an overlay that matches. You can have a good, like a positive overlay.
Absolutely.
You can have a white picket fence princess fairy tale overlay. And as long as the other person doesn't deviate from it, you never have that right hemisphere moment.
That's right.
Where you get to see them as separate.
Well, it's a situation where you begin to put someone on a pedestal. We do this with our pastors. We do this with our spouses. We do this with our celebrity, people we want to be like. We put people on pedestals with an expectation that they that they can't hurt you, won't hurt you, and they're all for your good and well-being. And I hope, and in most of our cases it is, but that once you've been wounded or hurt, or you've watched that person fall off the pedestal, if you will, in your mind, it's created issues in relationships.
And so it makes me wonder, like, how many different categories of life experience can baggage and wounds come from? Because we kind of been talking about previous relationships, but it might come it might come from your parents.
Yes.
It might come from some siblings that you grew up with. Or like I had a sister growing up. So I might presume some things from having lived in the same house as my sister and my mother about women in general that I don't realize I'm presuming.
Absolutely. And I could speak to the opposite. I had no brothers and no boy cousins on one side of my family. I didn't even know, other than my dad, who I somewhat idolized, I didn't know the male and that personality, if you will.
So it could come from trauma. Maybe like violence. Somebody experienced violence, or maybe sexual harassment or sexual violence of some kind.
It could even be rejection.
Religion, rejection.
It could even be rejection. I think, I guess what I'm drawing on is my experience as a teacher and watching my students. And especially the younger kids they're kids that would deal with being left at school or abandoned. So abandonment or to be rejected. Yes. Or to be rejected. People fear that, and having been rejected, it can create a traumatic moment that will impact the future moving forward.
Yeah, I think you can bring your baggage might seem like a positive thing. So like expectations. If you're like I grew up fundamentalist Christian Baptistic background, Southern Baptist, Independent Baptist, and this caused me to have certain expectations of my future spouse, right? And what I didn't realize is that even positive expectations can be a categorical overlay. So to categorize a person, like I have this chart on the 4 kinds of knowing and everything, and on one side the good side, on the participatory side, I think there's a net in here trying to get my coffee. On the participatory side, there's charity, and over toward the propositional side, there's category. So if I deal with you charitably, I see you with the right hemisphere afresh as this new person that I watch what expectations I have of you. Try not to form any expectations unless we've discussed them. But the problem is they're presuppositional. We don't know that we have these expectations. And we wind up getting disappointed because the other person also didn't know that we had those expectations, because we didn't know that they weren't axiomatic to them. We didn't know that they had to be stated.
That's right.
And the other person didn't know that they were there. And so you create this overlay, like if I'm a woman, my husband will do X, Y, Z. He will go to work. He will provide. He will work on cars on his free time. Whatever it is, you have no idea. And you could pull this pattern of what you think a husband should be from all kinds of different places: movies, your religion, your parents, something like that. And you've got this overlay that you are expecting of your spouse that they don't know about.
Oh, even from Scripture. I mean, the Scripture gives us descriptions of what to look for in our spouses, which I think, should be taken into consideration when we are looking for a possible spouse. It reminds me, when I was in college, my freshman year, I had a roommate that was, she and I were both very, very involved in our churches, and I was there because I wanted to be a teacher. That's what I was going to school for. I think she was there to find the Mr. to go with her Mrs.
Get her MRS.
MRS. So she actually had, we jokingly, or we do have we had a list of expectations for the person that we would date. She had a very detailed list of things. I'm talking everything down to the shoe size kind of list of what she expected in this future spouse. And I, as her friend, we would talk about this kind of thing, and I was just like, these are great. Some of these are really great. Some of them are personal to her, preferences. I said, but you might want to let the person know that this is an expectation up front for those things that aren't, for those things that are within their realm of
not immutable.
Right. Yes. And we laughed about it and that sort of thing. And, as we matured, she realized that there were some things that, prioritized over others. But it was one of those things we talked about, being able to communicate and express to the people that we were investing our time with, that was our expectations, So it was kind of funny. Hers was very specific.
Very specific, yeah.
The dudes didn't even know. The guys didn't even know, some of those expectations, which...
It reminds me of that video we watched where Steve Harvey was talking to that woman in the audience. And
I don't remember that one.
Because she kind of reminded me of you. She was a school principal.
Oh,
she was
yes,
dressed very nicely.
yes.
She was very articulate and, brunette, smoking hot, all that, just like you. And she was explaining what she wanted in a man. And Steve Harvey goes, I'm going to tell you something. You a lot.
You a lot. You a lot to handle.
You a lot.
So, I mean, she was putting it out there.
You might want to ease off on those expectations a little bit.
Not do away with them, but yeah, in that instance, it was a lot.
No, I'm going to... You ready for this?
What?
You going to say something else?
No, I'm ready.
All right.
What do you have to say? You're making me nervous.
Well, I started off with an anecdote that kind of puts you on the spot about some baggage that I think you had, that we think you had, or have.
Yeah.
Do you have an anecdote for some baggage you think I have? See, I'm putting you on the spot again.
Gosh, it's hard. Normally
it's hard to find something G-rated enough.
It's just, you try not to, I don't know. I probably should have put a little bit more thought into this.
Well, I can
Can
jog
you
your memory a
help
little bit.
prompt me? Yeah.
So, I mean, what comes to my mind is I was telling you about this earlier today. I find myself, I have to remind myself that I can talk to you. I have to remind myself that I can actually be truthful and speak my mind, and that you're not going to weaponize
Yes.
it against me. You're not going to
Or
use it against me.
right. And one other thing, the thing that I've noticed that comes to my mind too is I feel like you kind of meter
Right.
or filter things or preface something that you're going to say with some kind of pre disclaimer. And I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
you don't have to give a disclaimer with me. I don't know, where that has come from in the past
Right.
or
So I have this history of, and if you've ever, like, okay, on this channel we deal with Calvinists a lot, and if you've ever debated a Calvinist, you know this happens there too. But I have a history in relationships, or a relationship, however you want to say it, of just about like the cop says when they arrest you. You remember all those times you got arrested when they're like, everything you say can and will be used against you. I've been in relationships where that was the norm. Like, I found myself ruminating for days about how to say this and it not start a fight, or how to say it and it not be used against me, or you know what I mean? Like, and so I want it's kind of it's paralyzing to think that you can't, there's no way you can say a thing and it be received as intended. It's always going to be twisted some other way. There is no way to redeem it. There's no way to have it received as you intend it. And so what I find when I'm dealing with you is that by default, I will have a concern of some kind, and I'll be holding it back. And then when I realize that it's giving me anxiety and I'm not sleeping well, I'm like, oh, I forgot I'm with Paula. I can just say it.
yeah, I think too. One caveat to throw out there for the people that are listening, we've said this a zillion times. If we've said it before, is to just say what you're thinking, speak, honestly. I think too, one of the things that you do well is that you consider it. I think consideration is important, and respect is important before you come out with it, but you don't have to apologize for it. You can say what it is you want to say, and I might be like, whoa, and then I've got to stop and listen, give you time to form it up, and give bring whatever it is that you have a grievance or a concern, bring it to fullness in explanation rather than making apologies up front. And quite frankly, when you would do that, it would annoy me. And I'm like, it's as if you were coming at me with distrust, like I had done something to cause you to not just say it. And it would be frustrating because I'd have to go through a bit of pre-apologies before I could get you to say what it is you were
You
saying.
got to watch some credits before you get
And
to
I'm
the
like,
content.
oh my goodness, this dude's been hit, hurt, conditioned. I don't know what the word was, but it was something I had to get used to. And as we build trust, I think you've been able to, in most cases, come to me in conversation without apologies or prefacing it with disclaimers.
Maybe it's getting better.
I think it is.
Because I still feel the pull, the what do you call it? Caution. I still feel the pull to caution that outweighs my impulse to speak. Maybe that's a good thing with a brain mouth filter kind of thing. But yeah,
which I appreciate it. Like I said, the consideration and the mindfulness behind what you're saying, I think is good. I just don't want it to be baggage that stops the flow. You know what I'm saying? That stops the
right. Because I mean, it's better. So Rule Omega comes in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We allow ourselves to say things poorly,
even with emotion sometimes.
and then we come back and here, like, let me reframe. here's, I've been thinking about this, and here's what I want. I want to add some more to this and try to reframe it because I'm not quite satisfied with how it came out. And we give each other the grace to do that.
Not only the grace to do it in an occasion, but also don't assume I'm going to respond in a certain way. I'm not
Right.
your ex or your mom or your sister or your, friend at work. I am unique.
Right.
And I feel like honoring that uniqueness and allowing me to show you who I am in relationship to you is fair. And I think it takes a little bit of bravery sometimes if we've been hurt before, but I think you've got to test that out. You've got to.
Right. That bravery. And, there's that whole Jordan Peterson thing where speak the truth, and whatever the consequences are, is the best of all possible realities. One of the examples of I heard a clip from him today where problems left untended become bigger problems. Like if you don't pay your electricity bill 1 month, maybe that's not big of a problem. If you keep that up for a while, that problem grows and grows and grows and becomes a huge problem. So, approach that problem, get it knocked out. And so this also brings with it is possible. I could, in my attempt to articulate something that I'm feeling, because very often I have feelings that I'm dealing with that I really want to express, but I'm not sure how to. Not only maybe I have some baggage to where I'm a little apprehensive about sharing because how I've been treated when I've shared in the past, but maybe I also don't exactly know what it is, how to put to words what I'm saying or feeling, and that could be an issue as well. And sometimes it helps to be able to think those things out loud, and to allow your partner to say it wrong or say it sloppily or to try, and then to come back a few hours later or a day later or a couple days later and try again and like completely reframe everything.
Yeah. Do you have to know that they
But
care?
you said this. But
right.
you said this. I'm like, no, we're not going to do that.
No. Oh no, I would shut down in 5.6 seconds.
Exactly.
I would not be able to.
There's so many relationships that
continue
operate
like
that way.
Right.
They're constantly holding each other in contempt for what they poorly said, which makes them not want to say.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to say, you got to be able to re-say in a new and different way. You got to be able to rewrite the song.
That's right. Because I'm not the same person that I was 3 months ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago. I mean, I think we need to be able to deal with each other in that way. Now, on the flip side, when someone shows you a piece of who they are, I think there is some responsibility in that relationship to handle it in such a way that is not going to further traumatize the person, and to be aware of that sore spot when expressing yourself.
Because if I express myself too forcefully, I could be creating the new wounds, which will be your future baggage.
Correct. Yeah.
For your next marriage.
Oh gosh. This is it, babe.
For next week.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a such thing as like negative baggage. And I'll explain what I mean by this. Like, my ability to deal with conflict now, not that I claim to have any, but, well, I want to back up on something else. There's been times where I think the most intense discussion we've ever had, where you had a complaint about me. As I was hearing it, I could perceive the baggage. I knew this was not all the real, just the complaint about me. At the same time, there was some legitimate complaint about me. So and I'm saying this for the sake of the audience, that both you and I have like really done some introspective work. We've read books, we've been to therapy, we've had counseling, we talk to each other. And as I'm listening to you give it raw,
Rant. It was a rant.
sometimes
I
it
know
can be a
exactly
rant.
the situation you're talking about.
There is a, it was very important for me at that moment to have some ego transcendence. Or I would be ranting right back at you. I would have got defensive. I would be accusing. I could have had a whole litany of things that we could have just, and that wouldn't have been good for anything. And so it was, and then sometimes when we're being honest with each other, we say things that aren't exactly fun to hear. And what I want to stress is that having dealt with one's ego in a place to where we don't have an overinflated ego, so we can hear critical things about ourselves, we can hear that maybe there is something I can do better. And even if I have a rant coming at me and 75% of it is wrong, do I have enough transcendence over my ego to where I can bear the brunt of that wrong 75% and still humbly acknowledge and acquiesce to that 25% that is spot on? And I think that the ability to do that in relationships in general, I just can't stress enough. I mean, there's something like if we see, sometimes we turn on Married at First Sight when we're cooking lunch or something like that, and over and over again, ego, 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 and not just ego as in, what's the word? Egotistical, arrogant. Not just arrogant, but this egoic view of the universe. They see everything kind of in a narcissistic way, not pathologically narcissistic, but kind of like a child. Like you have a difficult time seeing past their own nose and seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So I can't stress enough for couples to do some ego work. Do some ego work.
Do some ego work.
Get past your ego. Get past your egoic view of the world and be able to have a conversation. Be able to take constructive criticism.
Now I can imagine there are people out there that says, "Well, I'm trying to do the work. She won't do the work, or I'm trying to do the work, and he's, I've given up." And I would say, I think having an honest conversation, first off, you have to be authentic in your desire to want to grow together. You have to have that. And I feel like if you can express that and say, "Look, here I'm having a struggle. I know this is a wound and this is how I've been reacting," and be able to, I don't know, it's one of those things. I think you have to give each other some wiggle room, some room to grow, some room to be yourself,
I'll tell you, I was like hanging on every word of what you were saying, because when it comes to, it's very often I encounter people who, and when I say encounter people, I'm talking about, I get emails from viewers all the time. My husband's a Calvinist. He won't talk to me. That is like one person is just completely uncooperative because they're ideologically possessed. And so I used to be a pastor. I used to be a company commander in the military. I'm an officer, so I've always been a leader of troops of some kind. So I've always had people coming to me with their marital issues, and there's always this one member of the couple seems to be genuinely interested in fixing things, and the other one seems completely unwilling to cooperate for whatever reason. And I might be able to get maybe a pretty good diagnosis of why they won't cooperate, but I don't know how to make them cooperative. I don't know how to do that. I have no idea what to tell people. Obviously pray for them,
Oh, absolutely. That and see them as a piece of you. See them as how you would treat yourself. See them as how you would care for your own child, or see your spouse as a soul.
And be curious.
You are a soul. You are a living, breathing. You're made up of more than just the external parts and the organs and your mind. I mean, you are a being, and be able to see with compassion that on each other, I think helps us in our just being people. You know, we aren't perfect.
Right.
We are flawed. We know we're flawed. And we have to show that compassion to each other. And I think a lot of people have lost that. They've gotten frustrated. They've gotten discouraged, or they've been wounded so bad, and they don't know where to turn. They don't know what to do. They don't know what's the next step. And then they lash out at each other, and it becomes this terrible mess. I think if we look upon each other with compassion, not allowing someone to run us over, but to see each other for who we are as a soul, as a person, you know. I think that helps too.
I know I look at you with curiosity every day.
That's part of your ego transcendence, though, because don't think you've got me figured out.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and some people do.
Sure don't.
You know, and sometimes it's that unknown that can be a little bit frightening. But
and when when the couple is constantly attacking each other, it's hard. You can't be open and defensive at the same time. And you're going to get what you give. And if the Bible says in Proverbs 15, a soft answer turns away wrath, and grievous words stir up anger. And so if your spouse is trying to talk to you and you lash out or you're going to get defensiveness. And
that's right.
Polyvagal theory, you can't be defensive and open at the same
That's
time.
right.
You can only be one. And it takes takes somebody who's really in touch, like with their body, emotionally intelligent. They can feel themselves becoming defensive to breathe and let that defensiveness calm down, to not let it get the best of them, to try to stay open anyway. There's some real skills there.
Yeah, there is. In the South, we say you catch more flies with honey.
Right.
In other words, if I've got an issue with someone, I'm not going to go charging in, screaming and yelling. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was working late, and I ordered food for delivery.
Right.
And they lost my order. It was 2 hours late, and I was like, where's the food? Simply getting on the phone and yelling at these folks, I knew that was not going to get me my end result.
Right.
So you have to
you're
have...
You're going to get spit in your food.
Right. And I guess...
extra garlic salt.
Yeah. So I guess my analogy is you have to see what your end goal is, too. What are you trying to get to? Yesterday, I was trying to get to some shrimp scampi with a Caesar salad.
Yeah.
That's what I needed in my life at that point. That's what I paid for. And I was hungry. I knew if I started ranting and raving and screaming and hollering, and I didn't let them run me over. I didn't let them when I called the driver, he's like, oh, you got to call the restaurant and tell them to get somebody else. Well, I was like, I knew at that point that he was shut off and he was not going to help me. So then I went to the next level, called the restaurant. Here's what happened. And they were sympathetic to it, responded in a way. It was still 3 hours before I got my food, but I feel like handling that with kindness is much better than just giving them what for. And I think if we as a couple look at what our end goal is, and handle each other in that mind frame too. Don't just let yourself get caught up in those feelings for the now and the here.
Right.
But to say, okay, I see and want this relationship to be healthy, fun. I want it to be life-giving. I want it to, have an aim for the relationship. And I think it changes how you contend with each other in going towards that mark.
You ever watch that show Quantum Leap? Back in the day? Sometimes I pretend that I am Scott Bakula's character, having leapt into my body to fix what is wrong. And it's for real. When you think about your own life as if you are someone else looking at it from a third person, I think that's it. For me, it kind of helps me transcend the ego and get perspectively out of that scenario and see the bigger picture and the greater good, and that pitching a fit in this moment really isn't going to help me. So I want to get back to this negative baggage thing. So it's easy to think of bringing wounds and baggage and expectations and things like that, but I think that sometimes baggage is a lack of skill sets. Okay, when it comes to conflict management, I've learned a lot in the military. I mean, because they teach you this stuff as a leader. And I've taken it upon myself to read a bunch of books about it and to try to educate myself. But the problem is this: when I was in church as a kid, I heard a lot about what to do with conflict. So I thought I knew. But in the house that I grew up in, and I guess I'll call my parents out here, they did not communicate well. They did not deal with conflict well. So I did not have conflict management modeled well. It was a situation to where, what do I say? Complaints weren't voiced and dealt with. They were avoided in two directions. And eventually you got two people that are just, they're coexisting, and not in the good way. And they wound up getting divorced back in 2017 after 44 years of marriage. That was kind of devastating to my paradigmatic worldview of the correct order of things. And I've always known certain things to be in place, and now this was not there. This was very strange for me. So I did not have conflict management modeled for me. So when I feel like I bring a deficit with me into, say, this relationship of not having seen it modeled, and people, and that another thing we talked about, people tend to go with what's familiar to them.
Yeah, we default.
And since I'm not familiar with it being handled well, there's my default mode circuit pops in, and I want to not handle conflict well.
Well, and you tend to be extremely agreeable.
Probably to a fault.
And which I feel like you in relationships could possibly lose yourself, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
You could, and then that's when you begin to stew on things, and you, what's the word I'm trying to get to? Resentment. That begins to brew because you didn't.
Yeah, if you're too agreeable.
Which we talked about this before on another
episode. You don't deal with the issue,
too.
and then you start brewing on it.
Yes. Yes. So by not having that modeled, you have enough wherewithal, though. This is what's interesting to me, is that you have enough acknowledgement and recognition to know that you don't know that. You know what you don't know in this situation. And you can either use it as an excuse and perpetuate it, modeling it for your kids and modeling it for the people around you. Or you could say, okay, I know this is my sore spot. I know this maybe, mom and dad did the best they could. They loved us, but I need to prepare myself in this way. I need to find resources, read scripture, find scripture that may address it, talk with and find people that do this well and begin to let them be models for what you need, you know? And I think knowing what your sore spots are, I think, man, that's you're already halfway there. If you can stop long enough to recognize what those wounds, what that baggage is, and then become proactive in addressing that, not using it as an excuse. I could easily say, oh, well, my ex, he cheated on me, blah, blah, blah. So you're going to, overlay it and then dismiss it. And then, not that that's true, but what I'm saying is you can throw out things at the other person without being proactive and trying to find your solution of that wound for yourself before engaging and overlaying it on your own relationship. I appreciate the fact that you recognize it and with respect sought and continue to seek models that help you grow.
Right.
See, I find you to be an exceptional communicator.
Well, thank you. I'm glad. I think that meaning is in the connectedness of things. Meaning is in your relationality to things. It's our relationship to each other brings meaning, and the quality of that relationship is the quality of meaning that can come from that. And we have relationships with, you can have relationships with an inanimate object like a mug or a pet or a cat or your job, and if you can't mediate that with healthy communication, you are short-circuiting your own capacity to have meaning in your life. So yeah, it's I think the ability to communicate is everything. I've done some circling. I've been to some circling camps, and I like to watch people who dialogue well. I think John Vervaeke is one of the best exemplifiers of how to dialogue well with somebody. And so I like to watch them. I like to watch Jordan Hall pause in the middle of a deep conversation and talk about how what he just heard is making him feel. Like, that makes me feel a little sad. He'll say, or what I'm feeling in my body right now, feeling a little tenseness. Right? He'll say that right in the middle. And it, seeing that modeled causes me to stop and think when I'm having my own conversations about what's going on in my body, and then communicate that. And you have this connectedness that occurs as a result. Familiarity. I think that can be baggage and wounds for some people. And what I understand is that whatever's familiar to you, even if it's not healthy or not good, you will tend to recreate it because it's what you know. And so if there's this cycle of being in abusive relationships, there's in the book I Hate You, Don't Leave Me, not that one, and also The Body Keeps the Score. It gives accounts of these women who would go to one abusive relationship after another, and they always complain about being in the abusive relationship, but they tend to also, it's almost like they seek them out. It's almost like they precipitate it becoming that way. So you could, because you are familiar with a particular toxic situation, you may be most comfortable when you can recreate it, even though that's not the way things should be.
Yeah. It makes me think of a meme I saw the other day. I'm terrible
You're
with
sharing
memes.
a meme with
I know.
me?
I never do. You've probably seen it already. And watch me mess it up. If you want to stop dealing with the clowns, stop going to the circus.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it's funny to me because, to your point about the abusive relationships, you have to see and understand where that's coming from in other people too, to try to avoid that.
What time is it? Where are we on the clock so far?
We got started late this evening.
We're almost at the 1 hour mark. So what do you think about some of these comments up here? This guy says baggage is something that should be left behind.
I don't know. I've learned. I
don't think you have the capability to leave it behind. It has to be worked through.
I think so. Maybe allow it, just like a wound becomes a scar. You're still going to have it with you.
Yep.
But how it affects you is going to be different. It could serve as a healthy reminder. Mm-hmm.
So I'm bringing my past with me no matter what I do about it.
Right.
I can't not bring it with me.
Yeah.
But how do I incorporate that? How do I How do I bring my healing from that in? So it's not a matter of if. It's not something that you can leave behind. It's more about becoming aware of it.
And either learning from it and fully integrating it into who you've become. You know, I feel like it takes a lot of work, but I think you can. I think you can integrate it.
It says listening is an important skill. We actually brought that up recently. I think I said to you, and I feel thankful. There was a time I was saying something, and I didn't feel like I was being listened to, and I was able to tell you that. Couples don't give themselves enough time to recognize each other. It'd be interesting to double click on what Anna Banana meant by that. To recognize each other.
Maybe give celebration to the positive things about each other. Does that recognize, or recognize as in, I see you and I know about that past wound, but despite that kind of recognition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If Anna, if you want to double click on that, you said baggage is something you should leave behind. Luggage is what you should bring. Okay.
I like that. I like that. That's what I would start saying. I've got my luggage with me.
Kevin needs to block. Oh, what do we have here? Let me see here. I don't know if I have any moderators in the chat with me, but let me block some of this spam we got up in
How
here.
does that even happen? That's unfortunate.
All right, so I think these guys are blocked from the channel. I'm gonna hide. I think because we're talking about relationships, the bots target keywords that show up in the transcript on the live feed.
Gotcha.
I've got a memory like an elephant. I don't forget anything. See, I was just thinking like, I was with somebody who they would remember everything. And every time we talked, everything would come up. And I'm not good at remembering the things. Like, I remember feeling like you made me feel bad twice last week, but I cannot tell you what they were. And I don't care. Like, I'm not good at remembering that kind of stuff.
I think, too, though, if you're in a relationship where it is you're being dismissed, that you need to be able to give those examples, though.
Yeah. And so, like, you started journaling one time in a past relationship.
Because I don't want to sit there and tit for tat it. You know?
I felt like I needed to start recording the conversations.
Yeah, that's not...
And by the time that happens, I'm like, that's something else going on there.
Yeah.
Somebody's leaving to go to a Bible study. Very cool, you two sharing your life with us. Many folks will benefit from this, including me. Well, thanks for saying that, Brother James. I hope it helps. I hope it starts conversations, because I don't necessarily think that Paula and I are going to say the most profound things you ever heard in your life, but if it helps you and your partner have a conversation that helps you, I think that's where the power is.
I think so. And if I could take my baggage, my luggage with me that I've gone through and be able to grow from it and share that with someone else, let's do it.
I'm not very good at understanding everything. I need to process things slowly. That's one of my issues. I'm a slow processor.
Yeah.
And people watching my videos might not guess that about me. But when I'm hearing things for the first time, I'll just sit there and stare at you for a good 8 minutes. I've been a supporter of Kev since the beginning. He helped me out of Calvinism.
Oh, that's great.
Richard's been with us for a while. Richard's a good friend here. Victoria. Okay, they're still talking about different places they've been to.
Yeah. No tolerance for lying.
No tolerance for lying. A woman knows, Anna says. All right. So we've gone through a few comments here. Okay, maybe Anna came back. It's being patient with each other's pasts.
Yeah.
Recognizing each other. Especially if we are aware of the secrets. No, we've had some conversations about things like this.
Yeah.
I remember I don't throw it in my hubby's face because I'm sure he's got a good memory.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for watching and for commenting. I'm hoping that this can get people to think and have conversations. You got any words of wisdom you want to leave us with?
I just, that's it.
That's it. That's all.
That's all, folks.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.